Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here, and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today it is the 1/48 scale Curtiss Tomahawk Mk.II from Airfix. So join me as I take a look inside the box and see what we've got. So starting off on the front, you can see we've got this rather attractive image of the Tomahawk in flight over a base. And it looks like a German base, so it's doing some sort of reconnaissance mission. Over here on this side, we've got our two different paint schemes which are included, and we've got an item code of A05133. Down here, bottom right, it says that this was designed and manufactured in the UK. And if I'm honest, it does have a slightly different box than normal because it's not as glossy. At the top here, you can see we've got a price that I paid for it in the works, which is a discount book arts and craft shop here in the UK. So we'll cover a little bit more about that later. Flipping over to the long edge, we've got some warnings in various languages, some symbols here, and an address for Hornby Hobbies, and a little logo saying that this has cartograph decals, so this should be absolutely fantastic. We've got some information here about the kit, saying the design and tooling dates from 2016 and the decal scheme and pack design is 2017. And when I cover off the history a little bit later on, that will be that, really. Flipping over to the other long edge, we've got, as usual, information about the actual Tomahawk. We've got a length of 202mm, a width of 237, and there's 106 pieces in here. So being 1/48 scale, it makes sense that there'd be more than the 1/72 version. And then we've got our two different paint schemes. The first one is a Tomahawk Mk.II, serving with 26th Squadron of Royal Air Force Army Cooperation Command in Gatwick in 1941. And then the second one is an aircraft flown by Sergeant William Houston, number 112 Squadron in Libya in 1941. We've got a selection of different paints here from the Humbrol range. It says that it's a skill level 2, so it shouldn't be too difficult to assemble. And we've got 2 flying hours, so cut out and keep that token. The short edges feature the same information as on the front, and the back is completely blank. So let's get this box open and see what we've got inside.
But before we do that, let's hear from today's sponsor. Blinkist is an app which takes over 5,500 non-fiction books and podcasts and delivers the most important ideas and messages in around 15 minutes or so, in a format they call blinks. The blinks I've found particularly helpful recently are those focused on self-improvement and mental well-being, and being so accessible either in audio or written format means that I can fit them in around my busy schedule. I found myself listening to the audio blinks whilst working on a project on the workbench or driving in my car. I recently listened to the Everyday Hero Manifesto by Robin Sharma, which has helped put parts of my life into perspective through positive outlook and shifting from generating excuses for not doing things and instead focusing on my results rather than failings to try and make 2023 a more positive year for myself. But that's not all. With the new Blinkist Connect feature, every premium plan can be shared by 2 different accounts at no extra cost. You'll both get access to a full premium Blinkist account and can recommend and share your favourite titles with each other. If you use my link in the description, you'll also get 25% off your premium membership when you sign up. So, get 25% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the description. Thanks to Blinkist for sponsoring this video. Now back to the review.
As usual, let's take a look at the instructions first, and they come in the familiar format from Airfix. So this is an A4 style booklet. On the front, we've got some information about the actual aircraft, and then down the bottom a few hints about what to do with your plastic. It says here you should wash your parts to remove any mold release. Flipping over, we've got some safety information and a key to the different symbols which you can expect to encounter during the build. And then we commence with the actual construction of the kit. So we start off with quite a few steps of assembling the cockpit sort of bathtub, as it were. There's a number of different parts, and all of them are labelled with the part number and a painting instruction as well. Down here you can see that we've got some transfers that need to go on the cockpit interior as well. And then flipping over to number 12, it tells us that we've got a pilot, which is always nice to see. So this has a pilot, so I'm tempted to do this in a flying pose. Moving on down, depending on which variant you do, there's a photographic reconnaissance version, so that requires a little window for a camera. Alternatively, if you're doing the desert version, it doesn't have that. And then we move on to installing the cockpit inside the aircraft. There's quite a lot of cockpit detail. And move on to assemble the fuselage parts. As we progress through the instructions, you can see down here it tells us that if you do want to use an aircraft display stand, which does not come with the kit, by the way, you do need to open these 2 holes. I do have access to a 3D printable version, so I'll probably use that instead. And we move on down, adding the tail surface. Engine cowling can be sort of open or closed. That's the sort of vent cowling there. And then move on to the landing gear. Landing gear can be raised or lowered. And then we get to the end. So there are 51 steps. It's not too involved, not too complicated by the looks of it. I think when we come to paint this, we might have a little bit of complication here where the sort of glass bits go over this bit of the canopy, cockpit, fuselage area. So that will require painting before the glass is added. And speaking of the cockpit, you can have it displayed open or closed. And then we've got our 2 paint schemes, which are printed in full colour. So here's the first one, which is the Army Cooperation scheme. And I actually put a poll up on my channel to say which version should I do. I quite like the look of this one because it's not the normal kind of paint scheme that you see P40s, which were exported in, because it's got those Battle of Britain colours, and it's got half of a wing here in black and the rest in Sky Type S. But as I'm sure when I put the vote results on the screen, everybody voted for me to do the second version, which is the more sort of popular version, which is the desert paint scheme with the stone and earth upper and the sky blue or azure blue underneath. But it does have those rather attractive shark's teeth, which is what I think people quite like the look of. So that was the instructions, up to the usual standard from Airfix and printed in colour, which is nice to see. Now we move on to the transfers, and these are from Cartograph, so they should be absolutely top notch. Just looking at these here, I can see that there's no major issues, there's no blemishes, there's no cracks, there's nothing torn. The printing is very fine. At the top in this area, we've got our common transfers, so they include all of the stencils, the cockpit transfers, the ones that go on the propeller, and the roundels. And then moving down, we've got our Army Cooperation ones here, and then our desert version here. And as you can see, these are some very lovely looking transfers. Shouldn't anticipate any problem with applying these to the model. Not that many for a 1/48 scale kit either, so you should be able to make quite quick progress. I've seen 1/72 scale kits with considerably more than this. It's probably why it's a level 2 in skill. So the final thing then is the plastic parts, and they come sealed in a plastic bag. So let's get that open. 2, 3 plastic sprues, and I think you might be able to notice that they are moulded in a much darker grey plastic than we're used to. Normally Airfix tends to have a sort of bluey grey plastic, whereas this is more of a grey plastic. It's much darker grey, and that's probably partly down to the fact that, as was mentioned on the box, this was manufactured somewhere in the UK, so they're using slightly different plastic. So 1, 2, 3. And then we've also got a sprue of clear parts as well. So let's have a quick look over these parts and see what we've got. So looking at this one first, we've got our lower wing half, our tail surfaces, propeller, spinner parts. They look possibly like landing gear, struts, and drop tanks. And flipping over, yeah, everything looks really nice. We've got very minimal flash. I can hardly see anything. The plastic doesn't feel greasy, not really. So it's up to you whether you wash this or not before you start building. I might wash it just for sanity's sake, but yeah, it's quite nice to look at. The detail on here is of the recessed variety, raised in a few places as appropriate, and there is even a hint of some rivets as well, which is nice to see. I particularly like on the aileron here, we've got the sort of stressed skin effect, which is very nice to see. Moving on down, you can see we've got some rivet detail on these components. and on the tail as well. So Airfix have spent quite a bit of time to pay attention to detail on this one. Is it as detailed as other kits from other manufacturers? Well, it's close. It's close, I'd give them that. A lot of other manufacturers would put rivets along all of these lines if they were prototypical. Obviously, I don't know if they were or were not, but I feel like Airfix have done a fair representation of that. So let's look at the next sprue, and here we've got our smaller components, including the pilot. You can see I've got a bit of stringing here. That's some plastic, which is left over from the moulding process. It's not damaged the parts or anything, it's just a bit of where it's been extruded, just a bit of stringing. But yeah, moving on to these parts, you can see there's loads of sort of detail on there. That's nice to see, isn't it? And on your cockpit interior parts, those are very highly detailed. There's the back of the pilot, has a ejector pin mark on there, but to be honest, you're not going to see that when he's sitting down in his chair. Coming on down, even the tyres have got a texture on them, which is really interesting. As mentioned before, I can't see any flash, not really. Very minimal. Machine guns there. I think those are the barrels of the machine guns. Those are moulded really nicely as well. And then our pilot. He looks all right. He looks very similar to the one that came in the Spitfire 14 I did a few years back. And he does have a sink mark right in his tummy. When you've inserted him inside the plane, probably won't be noticeable, but that's a little bit disappointing having a sink mark in there. But that seems to be the only part that I've noticed it on. So let's look at the last sprue. We've got our fuselage parts, and these are to the same standard as the other sprues, quite nicely detailed, not greasy, no flash really. Some very fine details. There's even down here some little protrusions there, which have come out quite nicely. Some nice detail on the radiator there. Flipping over, and on the inside here you can see that we've got our internal ribs. And there's even sort of a texture on the inside of, is that the wheel wells? I think that's the wheel wells. Got some sort of textured thing in there. Yes, it's a very impressive looking model. Cool, so let's look at the clear parts before we wrap this up, wherever I've put them. So here are the clear parts, and they are crystal clear. I can't see any blemishes, scratches. There's not flash on here, really. A little bit of stringing here, but that's on the sprue, so it doesn't really matter. Yes, they're very nice looking parts. The raised details there, the canopy frames, they're not overly raised. They're quite subtle, but they are enough to be painted on. Yeah, I like the look of this kit. So let's wrap this one up with a reminder of what we had. We had one clear sprue, 3 grey plastic sprues, and they're moulded in a more darker grey than a traditional Airfix kit, as this comes from a slightly different manufacturer. An absolutely beautiful set of transfers from Cartograph, one set of instructions which are to the usual standard from Airfix and come printed in colour, which is always great to see. And all of this comes packaged in a rather attractive box. So, as mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the history of this kit. This was originally tooled back in 2016 when it was released as a P40, whereas in 2017 they did another release, which was the export version for the UK, which featured the RAF versions here. I don't believe this has been released again since 2017, so this is 2017 stock effectively, which is probably a reason why it ended up in the works. I'm led to believe that Airfix will sometimes sell excess stock to the works, and therefore they sell it off for a discounted price. So you can see here I paid £20 for it when it was supposed to be £23 RRP. However, nowadays, because stocks have gone and they haven't reproduced any of these, you're probably going to be looking at maybe 25 plus in that sort of region if you wanted to get one of these for yourself at the moment. There does seem to be some stocks online at various online sellers, but it's probably going to be the second-hand market. I have heard good things about this kit. I am led to believe that it goes together really well, the fit is really good, and as we've seen in this video, the detail is good too. Down here it does tell us that, as I've mentioned previously, this was designed and manufactured in the UK, so this was produced here by one of Airfix's partners, compared to a lot of the kits which are manufactured in India. So that's why it's in a slightly different plastic, but it looks like they've paid attention to detail with the quality control, because I've not spotted anything glaringly obvious or wrong. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and let's wrap this one up. This looks to be a fun kit with some impressive detail, and it shouldn't be too difficult to build. I actually got this one a few years ago purely because it was cheap. I do have a bit of a thing for P40s. I've built a number of them on my channel so far, but I'm thinking of doing this one as part of a group build on my Discord server, which is about export and license built vehicles, which this would fit perfectly into the category for, seeing as it's an American aircraft which was exported to the UK for use by the RAF. So if that's something you'd like to see in the future, a potential build on this kit, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss that upload. If you enjoyed this video, dropping a like would be massively appreciated, and leaving a comment to let me know your thoughts on this kit would be fun to read as well. As always, a quick shout to my patrons and channel members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen, and whilst I'm here, I'd like to also welcome our two newest members who join us on Patreon. They are Chris and Derek. Welcome to the club. To find out more about how you can get involved, take a look at the links in the description. Finally, I think the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.